Refractive Software is proud to present Octane Render, a fully GPU-accelerated, fully unbiased interactive rendering engine. We're playing with an alpha build of Octane today, so let's open it up and check it out. One of the things I'd like to point out first is that being that this is a GPU-accelerated renderer, one of the things that we need to keep tab of is our GPU memory and managing our GPU. So we have a device manager. We can see right here the CUDA version. Right now, Octane requires a CUDA-enabled NVIDIA video card. You can take a look at what video card you have installed. If you have multiple video cards, you can actually choose them here. And you can see how the memory of your video card is being used and what is taking up that memory from your nodes to your image to your geometry so you can manage your scene better. Let's load an object. Let's start playing. To load one, I'm going to go down here to the graph editor, and I'm going to right-click and add an object, and then click Mesh. We'll go over to my directory. I have an object right here. Now, Octane can use anything that has been exported in the wavefront format. So Octane is not tied to a specific modeling package. If you can export in the object format, you can use Octane. So as we click on anything down here in the graph editor, it becomes editable over in the node inspector. So we can take a look at our mesh that we just added, and you'll see the list of all the materials that were in this mesh. Now, this was exported from Blender, and all of the materials came over intact as they were assigned with inside Blender. And you can see that they have no nodes off of this mesh node right here. But if you'd like to, you can actually use the power of the graph editor to create a very complex node-based material and connect them to each one of these main materials. But if not, you can just use the built-in ones as they came over inside this mesh, and we can edit them here. Now, as we can see, the little spaceships are over here. We've already hit 330 samples per pixel while I was talking at 3.3 megasamples per second. This scene has about 97,000 triangles. Now, one of the things is that you can click with your left mouse button, you can rotate around the view and it stays in a completely unbiased environment. You can grab the scene with your right mouse button and move it around, or you could zoom in and out using your middle mouse button or clicking on the wheel. So we can take a look at our scene interactively. We can see right now it's got a very plain white environment in it and just a whole bunch of diffuse colors. So let's spice up this scene and play with this a little bit. If you have a very complex scene, it's kind of difficult to locate the materials in this long list over here in the node inspector. So one of the great things about having an interactive rendering engine is that we have a color picker so that we could click on the floor, or we could click on this spaceship here, or even on this detail of the windshield, and the color will immediately jump over in this over here in the node inspector. So you don't have to hunt through that long list to actually find it. So what I'm going to do is we'll start tweaking some materials. First thing I'm going to do is click on the cyan material. Right now there are three material types in Octane. You have a diffuse material, a glossy material, and a specular glass material. This material I think would be good as a glossy. As you can see though, it's very specular, a lot of highlights on there. So let me zoom on here so we can see this little spaceship while we're working on it a little better. So one of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to add a specular map to make this thing look a little more junky and beat up, because this is supposed to be a small toy. So let me click on the specular, and right now it's set to be a float type. I'm going to change it to image and choose a specularity map here. And now we've got the map affecting the specularity here, but I'd like to tone that map down a bit. It's a little high. So now we have kind of like the appearance of a chipped up little metal ship. And I'm going to do the same thing for this red environment. I'm going to change it from a diffuse to glossy. Add the image type, the same specular map, and tone it down a bit. I'm actually going to make this a deeper red. I like it to not look so new. Same thing with this material. I'm going to make it look a little deeper. Now the color previews, as you can see, they're completely real time, so you can use the color editor here and actually watch your viewport and find the exact right color that you'd like. And the last one I need to change here is this green one. That's just too bright, so let's just turn that down a bit. And change this to a glossy type. And change that to an image type. Grab my spec map. Yeah, I'm feeling a little lazy using the same spec map for all three materials, but I hope you guys don't mind. Okay, so now we've made our little toy look a little bit more beat up. And it updated everywhere that material was. So now we still have our scene, but It's still looking a little boring. I'd like to improve the lighting a little bit. So let's go ahead and add an HDRI map for our lighting. And so to do that, we'll click on our texture environment. And right now we have two different types, daylight or texture environment. So this is an indoor scene, so I'm going to use the texture environment. There will also be the ability for any mesh to have its material emit, so that you can use mesh emitters. But again, since this is alpha software, that's not implemented yet, but it will be very soon. So I'm going to change the texture type to an image, and then I'm going to load an HDRI map. Now this was an HDRI map of a conference room that was very dim when I created it, and so the scene's kind of dark. But we can click on the camera, and we can crank up the exposure and get the scene to where we'd like it. Now we can take a look again, and you can see there's the environment in the background, so we can see that in real time. So now we've got our scene kind of lit properly, but there's something else that's missing. These little spaceships are supposed to be tiny, so one thing that would convey that great would be some depth of field. So I'm going to click on my thin lens camera. I'm going to crank open the aperture so I can get a very narrow depth of field. And now Octane will have real-time depth of field. So the little ships that are in front are out of focus. This one back here is out of focus. And whatever is in the center of the screen will be in focus. But in the spirit of Octane, to make this more interactive, we also have an autofocus picker. So if you'd like to focus right here on this spaceship, you could click it and everything would go out of focus. If you'd like this spaceship to be in focus, we can click there and have the focus jump right to there. We can also click right here. I'll leave the scene right here and we'll let it just render. And so already the scene is cranked up to almost 50 samples per pixel, running at 2.4 mega samples per second. So we'd let this scene completely render out, but if we'd like to do some more tweaking, we can pause the render and then go back over to our camera. We could change the exposure, we could change the vignetting amount, we could then also change a camera to an actual camera response curve. There's a bunch of different settings in there. We'd also can go and change our resolution, crank up the resolution. We could then crank up our rendering parameters, more samples per pixel, and a deeper ray depth so we can get even more unbiased results, and let that crank away. And when we're done, we would save our image. So thank you so much for taking the time to check out Octane Render. What are you waiting for?